Don't let Google Maps fool you. Yakutia isn't just a location, it's a whole different realm. Here boiling water evaporates mid-air eyelashes, freeze solid within minutes, and cars can't afford to take a break. Sounds like a low-budget sci-fi movie. Not even close. This is real life, and there's an entire city living through it every single day. Thermometers have snapped from the cold. Fish are sold outdoors without refrigeration. The Siberian wind does all the work. People don't dress warm to stay alive. They suit up like they're stepping onto another planet. And yet, through all of it, they've chosen not to leave. Number 1. The coldest heart of Russia. Yakutia is Russia's largest region, almost the size of India, but with a population of just over 900,000. So sparse that some areas are hundreds of kilometers from the nearest settlement. This is not a place you would choose to live for its pleasant weather or good infrastructure. It is a geopolitical and survival experiment where the government, the people, and the climate are all testing each other. The capital Yakutsk has a 7-month winter, with average January temperatures dropping below 40 degrees Celsius. However, this figure only describes the general level. In deeper regions, such as Oymyakon, the recorded cold has reached 67.7 degrees. This is the coldest recorded in a permanent human settlement. Notably, in early 2023, the temperature here still hit 62 degrees, showing that the cold is not historic, but continues every year. Most notably, while climate change is warming the planet, Yakutia is being hit in a double whammy. It's getting colder in winter and more unstable in summer. In June 2023, daytime temperatures hit 32 degrees in a region accustomed to frost. As a result, hundreds of wildfires have broken out, burning the frozen taiga. Melting permafrost not only makes houses tilt, but also releases methane, a greenhouse gas 25 times more potent than CO2. What forces them to continue living here? There is no simple reason. Yakutia is rich in resources, diamonds, gold, gas, but the price of living here cannot be measured in money. Every time winter comes earlier than expected, or summer dries up the old forests, the entire electricity heating logistics and food systems are pushed into a state of alert. Not because of unexpected natural disasters, but because everyone knew about them in advance, but did not have the conditions to deal with them thoroughly. In Yakutia, people do not conquer nature. They just prolong each cycle of survival and accept the degradation of infrastructure as part of their fate. Even now, hundreds of settlements are connected to the world by river in summer and by ice in winter, which means they are largely cut off. There are no year-round roads, no reliable transportation, no long-term climate change response scenarios. The cold is more than a physical phenomenon. It is a political reference point, a test for an administration that promised to open up the future for this far north. And so far, that test has been delayed. Number 2. Infrastructure in dangerous state. Winter in Yakutia is unprepared. When temperatures drop below 50 degrees, any delay in construction, repair, or operation has a knock-on effect. Yet the infrastructure here has never been completed, let alone adapted to the increasingly complex climate risks. The most densely populated areas, such as Yakutsk and Oymyakon or Migrate, still contain hundreds of Soviet-era buildings, most of which were not designed for the current geological conditions. Thawing permafrost has made the ground unstable, with foundations shifting year by year, cracking on multiple floors and beyond repair. In the middle of winter, when road access becomes impossible, generator failures in outlying areas become a matter of survival. Many settlements are accessible only by helicopter or snowmobile, and roads have been virtually non-existent for 8 months. The question is not so much who is responsible, but how stable a system that operates on a delicate line between heat and cost. Figures from 2024 show that Yakutia's emergency heat system costs more than 15% of the region's total budget, or nearly $470 million a year, not including the costs of repairing damage from wildfires or subsidence caused by thawing permafrost. On an individual scale, each apartment must be equipped with double insulation walls, thicker than 40 centimeters, double doors, triple glazing, and a separate heat dissipation system. But that is in theory. In reality, more than 30% of housing in Yakutsk is still old wooden or concrete houses, many of which cannot be renovated, but can only be demolished. The government once announced a program to relocate households to anti-collapse apartment buildings, but after 3 years of implementation, less than 20% of the progress has been made. As a result, people have to live in buildings with cracked walls, sloping ceilings, or reinforced only with temporary support beams. In many areas bordering the taiga, summer ice floods are no longer a rare occurrence. In 2024, more than 60 regional transport disruptions were recorded in just 3 weeks. Roads already fragile and partially paved were easily dislodged as the ground beneath them turned from solid to mud in just 24 hours. This forced the closure of more than 40% of the routes connecting settlements to the regional administrative center, with no clear date for when they would reopen. Supply routes became almost entirely dependent on small transport aircraft and periodic radio signals, which were unreliable during periods of headwinds or poor visibility. Where can they go now? Reception infrastructure in other regions is not expanding fast enough, while the cost of resettlement, even within the region, has exceeded $3,000 per person by 2024. Meanwhile, the average income of Yakutia residents remains below $550 per month. So what are the real options in this situation? Number 3, clothing. As medical devices at 50 degrees Celsius, the concept of fashion disappears completely. A coat is no longer an accessory, but plays the role of protective equipment. In Yakutia, wearing it incorrectly does not cause discomfort, but leads to injury. The first layer next to the skin must be a tight, waterproof wool. The outer layer is an animal skin, mainly from reindeer or thick-haired wolves, so thick that it can stand up without a hanger. The deep-cut leather boots are stuffed with fur. Inside the outer layer is protected from freezing from wet snow. The sole is hand-stitched with rawhide so that it does not become brittle at low temperatures. Glasses are almost non-existent because the metal sticks to the skin. A wrong move. A gap of a few seconds is enough to freeze the skin in place. Children's clothing is made in a cocoon structure. The outer layer of fur is many times the actual size. Children cannot dress themselves, cannot put on their own shoes, and cannot remove their gloves for several hours when they go outside. In rural areas, far from distribution centers, having adequate clothing is not an option. Hunting for fur is not only a cultural practice, but also a means of survival. In 2024, more than 60% of the communities in the remote eastern regions of Yakutia still used fur as the main material for winter clothing. This proportion has increased slightly compared to 3 years ago, reflecting a return to traditional methods in the face of uncertain industrial supply. This is not a nostalgic choice, but a direct response to the realities of failed commerce. In such conditions, each winter garment cannot be called a seasonal product. It is a protective tool, a vital shell that is tied to the identity and sustainability of a community. The question here is no longer who can withstand the cold better, but who has the capacity to access the right clothing so as not to be thrown out of the cycle of work, study, and life. Every time the snow and ice come down too quickly, those who do not have the means to dress are simply excluded from the system, not because they are weaker, but because they lack the necessary protection in an environment that is unforgiving of errors. Number 4, durability, designed since the 13th century. Before electricity heat pipes or settlement policies, the Yakut people existed in this land with a closed survival system, temporary seasonal housing, naturally processed food, clothing made from animal skins, and spiritual rituals to maintain the balance between people and nature. The traditional wooden houses of Yakutia are not a heritage site, but the result of centuries of struggle with the permafrost. According to a 2022 engineering survey, nearly 70% of houses in the eastern countryside still maintain a high wooden pile structure 1 to 1.5 meters above the ground. This design insulates the entire foundation from the heat transmitted back from the permafrost, preventing foundation cracks and subsidence in the spring, when thaws often cause irregular deformations of the ground. Here, the average winter temperature ranges from 40 to 55 degrees. In such conditions, the concept of modern becomes relative. Water purifiers freeze in pipes, lithium batteries lose power after just a few minutes outdoors, and industrial food chains become meaningless without the ability to deliver continuous traffic. As a result, more than 80% of winter food is still processed by locals in the traditional way, dried fish hung on racks. In the open game meat hung straight in the shade, and drinking water extracted from hand-cut river ice. No freezers, no electricity. The structure of social response in Yakutia is a continuous continuum between habit climate and systemic limits. In an environment where policy can be disrupted by the seasons, the most durable thing is often the thing that seems the most outdated. A brick kiln, a wooden house, or a frame for drying fish. These are all the links that keep the system from collapsing. What do you think of a place that exists not by progress, but by not losing the old things that have proven their ability to survive over generations? Number 5. Travel between physical boundaries. Yakutia does not promote itself as a destination. It has no service industry. In the traditional sense, no all-inclusive resorts, no mass hospitality system. Yet it attracts a steady stream of visitors each year, most of whom come not for the scenery, but to test their bodies against living conditions that are virtually impossible to replicate anywhere else in the world. Winter experiences in Yakutsk or Oymyakon are unlike any other outdoor activity. Temperatures of 50 degrees are not just numbers, but a barrier to technology materials and survival reflexes. Cameras stop working after 10 minutes. Phones turn off even with a full battery. Metal handles freeze as soon as they touch bare skin. Tours are timed 15 minutes outside, 30 minutes in a warm car in a strictly controlled cycle. Those who do not comply are quickly dismissed from the tour. There are no privileges for those accustomed to the cold. Here the temperature does not recognize experience. The most popular destination is Oymyakon, which regularly records the lowest temperatures ever recorded in an inhabited area. Access is not fixed year-round. In the summer, the terrain turns to mud, making it easy for trucks to get stuck. In the winter, travel is only possible by temporary runways or specialized vehicles, depending on the weather conditions of the week. Even simple activities like taking photos require a companion who knows how to operate equipment without connectivity on-site repairs and emergency assistance. So what makes them come back after they understand the limits of this destination? Each visit is not just a small source of revenue, but an opportunity to sustain communities that depend on short-season supplies and services. In 2024, the peak season will last less than 70 days, but it will generate more than 60% of the income for logistics groups in the central Yakutsk region. In an environment of policy and infrastructure uncertainty, each trip becomes part of a mechanism for sustaining the community rather than a consumptive activity. Number 6. Resources do not distribute benefits equally. Yakutia is not a forgotten land. It accounts for nearly 99% of Russia's total diamond production, or about 30 million carats a year, and nearly 20% of the global supply. In addition to diamonds, the region also has gold coal, natural gas, rare earths, and strategic minerals. The value of its resources is clearly quantified, but the distribution of benefits is not. In the 2024 local fiscal report, spending on health and education combined is less than 12% of the regional budget, while spending on energy maintenance and emergency fuel distribution accounts for nearly 38%. This ratio reflects the imbalance in development priorities. Instead of investing in long-term resilience, most resources are spent on coping with weather on a year-by-year basis. As climate conditions become more extreme, relief costs increase steadily without creating fundamental structural change. Even in the most developed settlements, people still face weak electricity water shortages and unstable heating systems during the changing seasons. Figures for the first quarter of 2025 show that more than 40% of rural residential units in the region do not have access to a reliable water supply system. Many areas still use drilled wells or draw surface water from seasonal frozen rivers. Meanwhile, the amount of electricity consumed for industrial water pumping at mines is many times higher than the total household consumption in the region. In a harsh mining environment, equity lies not in the opportunity to mine, but in the ability to protect the living conditions of those who remain. Resources do not lower energy prices, do not lead to infrastructure improvements, and do not guarantee stability. Profits are made on ice, but much of the ice remains underfoot for those who cannot leave. Number 7. System in prolonged downstanding state. Yakutia's governance decisions are often reactive rather than proactive. Despite being an autonomous republic within the Russian Federation, the region is almost entirely dependent on the federal budget, especially in areas related to energy transport and winter housing. The low level of financial autonomy leads to delays in policy implementation, especially when weather conditions severely limit construction and operation times. Every infrastructure project has to be recalculated from scratch each season. In 2023, a new heating pipeline was disrupted by a 19-day early freeze. Materials were held up midway, construction schedules were halted, and the project was put on wait for next season status. The planning process could not keep up with the pace of climate change, causing management costs to increase with each cycle without improving the bottom line. Yakutia has large gas reserves, but more than 60% of small settlements still rely on diesel generators and coal imported from far away. The gas pipeline only serves industrial clusters and the central area, leaving many areas consuming 4 times the national average. In winter, each supply trip becomes a gamble with the weather. In the first 3 weeks of 2024, 3 eastern towns lost power completely when ice broke down power lines, and no vehicles could reach the site because of headwinds and temperatures below 50 °C. The question is not technology, but speed of response. When every regional decision has to wait for central approval, the lost time is irreplaceable. In a place where winters do not repeat on a calendar, the system cannot be operated on a centralized model. What system do you think can withstand a climate like this when it takes 3 weeks to fix a power line? Number 8. Tension between the will to stay and the pressure to migrate. The steady rise in Yakutia's population is driven by a counterforce, an effort to preserve indigenous communities with cultural ties, and a drive to leave the cold for larger economic centers. Over the past decade, migration from Yakutia's rural settlements has been steadily increasing, especially among those aged 18 to 35. In 2024, this group alone accounted for more than 62% of all those leaving the region. Popular destinations are Novosibirsk, Krasnoyarsk, and Moscow, where living conditions are considered less harsh and career options are more diverse. It is noteworthy that most of those who leave do not return. The loss of the young population creates a serious gap in the labor force. Jobs requiring the operation of technical facilities, maintenance of heating systems, public health, or winter supplies are all understaffed. The delivery of public services depends on the dispatch of specialists from large cities, while the demand is daily and continuous. The conflict between political expectations and personal choices creates a long-lasting strategic vacuum. In this context, is the system still capable of functioning stably for those who remain not? Because they want to choose Yakutia, but because there is no more viable way out. Number 9. A community shaped by climate limits. In Yakutia, winter is more than just a recurring natural phenomenon. It becomes a cycle that organizes society, shapes collective behavior, and limits every important decision. From education to healthcare to logistics. In conditions where temperatures can drop below 50 degrees Celsius for weeks on end, everything is forced to revolve around the system's capacity to withstand. Schools only open if the temperature does not drop below 48 degrees Celsius for primary schools and 52 degrees Celsius for secondary schools. Prolonged interruptions reduce educational performance, especially in remote areas where there is no reliable internet access for distance learning. Every winter, Yakutia's entire rhythm of life is restarted in an emergency fashion. The open-air food market is open for only a few hours, as daylight hours are limited to 5. Fish, meat, and vegetables are naturally frozen. Hanging in the open air, no refrigeration is needed. Trucks must be kept running. If the engine stops, the oil will wax and the entire trip comes to a halt. The problem becomes most apparent when new residents move in. Not everyone understands that communities are defensive structures. Failure to share survival skills, from how to insulate windows to how to start a generator in the cold, means failure to shoulder shared responsibilities. Do you think a community can survive when most newcomers don't know how to keep the water pipes warm on a 50-degree night? Yakutia maintains its stability not through technology, but through its ability to maintain community discipline like a machine operating in extreme weather. As its backbone dwindles through migration or systemic fatigue, no one knows how much longer this chain of support will hold. Number 10. Occasional sunshine and long-term problems in Yakutia. A sunny day is not simply a good weather condition. It is a rare occasion that allows you to repair a roof, start your car without warming up for 30 minutes, or transport goods a little more easily. The sun is irregular, not seasonal, and not long enough to plan for any structural changes. In 2025, the entire region had less than 40 days with more than 6 hours of sunshine. Adaptability, therefore, comes not from waiting for favorable conditions, but from operating in the face of repeated instability. In such an environment, no solution is permanent. Every solution is temporary, and every person who stays becomes part of a chain reaction between nature policy and reality. Yakutia does not require one to understand it all at once. This land is not explained in words, but in physical limitations that force people to adapt every day. What has just been told is not to praise or justify a place that seems impossible to live. It is simply the reality where hundreds of thousands of people continue to exist, not because of the easy choice, but because no one else maintains that rhythm of life for them. If you find these slices help you see the world a little more broadly, even if it's just a frozen corner, leave a comment. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the NVL Travel Documentary channel to continue accompanying us on journeys that don't follow the usual routes. Each follow is a reason for us to continue to delve into places where the map is usually blank.